The day had started like any normal workday at the research outpost, but for her, it already felt heavier than usual. She had been assigned another late evening survey shift, something she didn't mind, but the rest of the team always joked that she was the one who never said no. The outpost sat on the edge of a rocky alien valley, a place that often looked peaceful from a distance, but changed completely once the twin moons started rising. Shadows moved differently. Sounds echoed longer. Even the wind felt like it carried secrets. She tightened the strap of her pack and checked her scanner before stepping onto the slim walkway that led down the slope. The sun was setting behind the ridge, leaving a warm orange line across the ground. She had always loved that moment of the day, when everything felt half awake and half asleep, like the world was holding its breath. Her work was simple: collect samples, note any changes in creature activity, and return before full nightfall. Most of the creatures around the area avoided humans, so she rarely felt unsafe. She followed the marked path, scanning a few glowing plants, listening to the soft hum of distant life. She always walked slowly on these trips. It helped her notice things other people missed. Half an hour into her walk, she paused. A strange sound drifted through the airsoft, shaky and almost like a whimper. She frowned and turned off her scanner for a moment to listen more clearly. The sound came again, a trembling little cry that reminded her of an animal calling for help. It didn't match any creature she knew. She followed the sound carefully, stepping off the main path. The ground dipped slightly, the rocks sharper and uneven. She crouched low, brushing aside tall grass. The crying grew louder. Her body tensed, but it wasn't fear, just alertness. Something was definitely down there. A few more steps, and she finally saw it dotted first. She thought it was a strangely shaped rock, curled tightly like it wanted to disappear. But then it moved shivering, pressing itself deeper into the little gap between stones. A tiny creature, no bigger than her forearm, with shimmering scales and a long, trembling tail. Its breathing was quick, almost panicked. She recognized the species from old research files, and her breath caught for a moment. It was an alpha hatchling. Every alien at the outpost talked about them like they were disasters waiting to happen. Even fully grown creatures of its species were known for their powerful instincts and unpredictable reactions. And the hatchlings? The stories said they were aggressive from the moment they were born, biting anything that came near, even their own kind. But this one, it didn't match those stories at all. It looked scared, vulnerable. Hurt. She slowly placed her scanner on the ground, choosing not to use it. She didn't want to startle the creature. Softly, she crouched, lowering herself to its level. The hatchling lifted its head a little, revealing big, bright eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. There was no rage in them, only fear. "It's okay," she whispered gently, even though she knew it couldn't understand her words. It could understand tone, though most creatures could. The hatchling blinked slowly, its eyes following her every movement. She noticed a small cut on its side, nothing too deep, but enough to make the little creature weak. Something must have chased it. Or maybe it fell. She didn't know. She extended her hand a little, palm open, keeping her movements slow and controlled. The hatchling let out a soft growl, not angry, just a warning. She respected that and stopped moving. She stayed there quietly, giving it time. After a moment, the creature's breathing steadied, and it lowered its head again. Exhausted. Her heart softened a little. Every instinct in her told her she couldn't leave it there. The nights in that valley grew cold, and predators came out. A wounded hatchling, no matter how ferocious its species was said to be, wouldn't survive. She spoke softly again. "I can help you, but only if you'll let me." She slowly reached into her pack for a small thermal wrap, something she carried for emergencies. She unfolded the fabric gently, making sure it didn't make sudden noises. The hatchling watched her carefully, but didn't fight when she began to rap at Dot. When she lifted the creature, she felt its tiny claws grip the fabric lightly. Not attacking, just holding on Dot. As she stood up, she felt the hatchling's small heartbeat against her arm, fast and frightened. She hugged it closer, shielding it from the cold wind as she walked back toward the outpost. The path felt longer going uphill, but she moved steadily. When she reached the entrance gate, 2 workers noticed what she was carrying. One of them widened his eyes immediately. "Is that?" "No, it can't be." She nodded slowly. "An alpha hatchling." They both took a step back. "Those things are dangerous," one whispered sharply. "You should have left it out there. They attack anything that touches them." She looked down at the creature in her arms. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't even moving aggressively. It had tucked its head under the wrap like it was trying to hide from the world. "I couldn't leave it," she said softly. "It's injured." "You don't know what you're doing," the other worker warned. But she didn't respond. She just walked past Dot, inside her small research dome. She placed the hatchling on a padded table. It lifted its head, eyes scanning the room with curiosity and fear. She kept her distance at first, letting it adjust to the new environment. It sniffed the air, letting out a small chirping sound. She wasn't sure if it was a warning or a question. After washing her hands, she gathered a few first aid supplies, gentle disinfectant, soft wipes, and nutrient drops safe for alien species. She approached slowly again, keeping her posture relaxed. When she touched its injured side, the hatchling tensed but didn't lash out. She cleaned the wound carefully, murmuring calm words as if she were treating a frightened puppy. The creature trembled but stayed still. She couldn't believe it. Everything she had ever been told about alpha hatchlings said the opposite. But this one wasn't wild or vicious. It was simply scared. After treating the wound, she filled a small dish with warmed nutrient gel. She placed it gently in front of the hatchling and stepped back. At first, it didn't move. Then, slowly, it stretched its neck forward and sniffed the dish. A moment later, it began to eat, tiny bites at a time. She let out a quiet breath. She didn't realize she was holding Dot as the hatchling finished eating. It looked up at her with soft eyes, blinking slowly. She didn't know if alien creatures felt gratitude the same way humans did, but something in its expression felt gentle. The room grew quieter as night settled outside. She dimmed the lights so the creature wouldn't feel overwhelmed. As she worked on her notes, she heard a small movement. The hatchling had shifted, curling its tail around itself, settling comfortably on the thermal wrap she had placed earlier. Every few minutes, she glanced at it, expecting it to start showing aggressive behavior. But it simply watched her with slow blinks, its breathing steady and calm. She felt something strange, something warm grow in her chest. She didn't know why the little creature had acted differently from the stories. Maybe it was too young to be aggressive. Maybe the stories were exaggerated. Or maybe, just maybe, it had sensed she wasn't there to hurt it. Outside, the night wind started howling softly, and the walls of the dome hummed with the sound of distant wildlife. She checked the hatchling once more before sitting down again. It didn't move this time. It looked peaceful, almost sleepy. She whispered quietly, "You're safe here." The hatchling's eyes closed slowly, like it understood. That night, she realized something important. Whatever the rest of the outpost believed about alpha hatchlings, this little one didn't match their fear-filled stories. And she wasn't sure where this path would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't turn her back on the tiny creature that had trusted her so deeply on the first night they met. The next morning came earlier than she expected. Her alarm hadn't even gone off yet, but a soft, rhythmic sound made her open her eyes. For a moment, she wasn't sure what it was. The room felt unusually warm, and something faintly tickled her arm. When she turned her head, she saw the little hatchling curled up near her bed, not on the table where she had left it last night. Somehow, it had managed to climb down quietly and make its way to the floor beside her. Its tiny chest rose and fell in slow breaths. It was asleep, lying half on the thermal wrap and half on the soft rug. She stared at it for a long moment, surprised that it had moved so close without waking her. She slowly sat up, careful not to disturb it. The first thought in her mind was simple. It trusted her far more than she expected. She got up quietly and stretched. The chilly morning air made a light fog collect near the window. Outside, the sun was barely rising, throwing soft pink light over the rocky valley. She walked to the small food dispenser and prepared her own. Breakfast simple oats and tea, then prepared a warm, nutrient mix for the HATCHL, ING. By the time she placed the small dish near its nose. The creature stirred. Its eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly before adjusting to the light. For a moment, it looked confused, like it wasn't sure where it was. Then it saw her, blinked once, and relaxed. "You moved," she whispered with a small smile. "You really like being close, don't you?" The hatchling slowly pushed itself up and sniffed the dish. Then it began eating, faster than yesterday. She noticed it wasn't trembling anymore. Its body language looked calmer, more settled. When it finished, it licked a tiny drop of food off its nose, then looked up at her again. She washed the dish and turned on her scanner. She needed to check the creature's vitals, breathing, temperature, muscle activity, just basic monitoring. When she moved closer with the device, the hatchling watched her, but didn't back away. It sat calmly, tilting its head a little. She ran the scan slowly, speaking softly so it wouldn't react. Everything looked surprisingly stable. The wound was healing faster than expected, and its heartbeat had softened. Not the frantic, scared rhythm from yesterday. But there was something else too, something she wasn't sure how to record. Every time she stepped away, the hatchling's eyes followed her, almost like it didn't want to lose sight of her. She made notes on her tablet, thinking about how she would explain this to the others without sounding like she was imagining things. Most of the outpost would laugh or tell her she was being irresponsible. Some would call her brave. Others would call her careless. But none of them had seen the way the hatchling had looked at her last night when she treated its wound. When she finished her notes, she cleaned up the medical supplies and prepared her gear. She had another short survey shift in the afternoon and needed to brief her team leader before then. She looked over at the hatchling, which was now sniffing around her room curiously. Every little object seemed new to it: the blanket corner, the shelf, the folded jacket she had left on a chair. "Stay here," she said softly. "I'll be back soon." The hatchling stared at her with round eyes, its tail curling around its small body. She wasn't sure if it understood the meaning of her words, but something in its expression made her pause. For a moment, she wondered whether she should leave it alone in the room. But she had no choice. The outpost didn't allow creatures in the common areas without supervision. As she left the dome, she took a deep breath, preparing herself for the questions she knew were coming. The hallway was quiet, but the moment she passed the first workstation, 2 people noticed her. "Did you sleep at all?" One of them asked, half joking. "Not much," she admitted. "Had some things to take care of." "Things or that creature?" The other one asked, raising a brow. She stayed calm. "It needed treatment." They exchanged nervous looks. "You should get rid of it," someone else muttered. "Those hatchlings aren't meant to be handled." She ignored the comment and walked past them. She wasn't in the mood to argue. When she reached her team leader's office, she lightly knocked and waited for permission to enter. Inside, the leader sat behind a desk filled with tablets and data charts. The moment she mentioned the hatchling, a sigh filled the room. "You brought it inside?" the leader asked, looking both surprised and concerned. "It was injured," she repeated patiently. "If I had left it out there, it wouldn't have survived." "I know your heart is in the right place," the leader said softly, "but you're dealing with a creature no one fully understands. Their instincts are unpredictable. Maybe the stories are wrong," she suggested carefully. "Maybe they're not dangerous from birth. At least, not all of them." Her leader shook their head gently. "Even if that's true, we can't risk it. Keep monitoring it today, but a decision will have to be made soon." She felt a weight settle in her chest. A decision. That meant either transferring it to a containment unit or releasing it back outside, which would mean leaving it helpless again. She nodded politely before leaving the office, though her mind was still spinning. When she returned to her dome, the first thing she saw made her stop in surprise. The hatchling had climbed onto her chair and was now curled in the middle of it like it owned the place. Its tail wrapped around itself, and its little head rested against the back of the chair. When it heard her enter, it lifted its head, chirped softly, and slowly crawled toward her. She laughed quietly. "You weren't supposed to move that much." It ignored her scolding and rubbed its head against her leg, like it was greeting her. The simple gesture made her chest warm. She sat on the floor, and the hatchling climbed into her lap without hesitation, curling its body there as if it had decided from the very beginning that she was the safest place in the universe. She stayed like that for a while, gently stroking the smooth scales on its back. The creature closed its eyes, making a soft humming noise, almost like a purr. She had never heard of this species making such sounds. She wondered if she should record it, but decided against it for now. Some moments didn't need to be turned into data. Some moments were just meant to be felt. Later that afternoon, she prepared to leave for her survey shift. She set up a soft enclosure in the room, something temporary to keep the hatchling safe. But when she tried placing it inside, it let out a tiny, almost sad chirp, pressing its body against her hand. Her heart tightened a little. She knelt down and whispered, "I'll be back soon. I promise." She stayed until it calmed down before gently closing the enclosure. The hatchling watched her the entire time she walked toward the exit. Its eyes round and shining. Her shift was shorter today, since much of the area had already been surveyed recently. Still, the entire time she worked, her thoughts kept drifting back to the hatchling waiting for her. She felt something she hadn't expected: responsibility, yes, but also a strange kind of companionship. It had been less than a day, yet it already felt connected to her in a way she couldn't explain. When she finally returned to her dome, she opened the door to find the hatchling wide awake, pressed against the enclosure wall as if listening for her footsteps. The moment it saw her, it chirped loudly, its tail tapping the floor. She smiled and opened the gate. The creature came rushing out, not aggressively, just excited, and rubbed against her leg again. "You missed me?" she whispered softly. The hatchling climbed onto her lap again and settled there, closing its eyes. She felt the warm weight of its small body and let out a long breath. She didn't know she'd been holding Dot as the night grew deeper outside and the cool wind brushed against the dome walls. She stayed with the hatchling on the floor. Its breathing steadied, soft and warm and peaceful. She stroked its back gently, feeling the slow rise and fall of its tiny body. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The outpost might force her to transfer the creature. They might not understand the gentle bond forming between them. But tonight, none of that mattered. The little hatchling had chosen her, trusted her. And for now, that was enough. "Dot," she whispered. "You're safe with me?" The hatchling shifted slightly, curled tighter against her, and slowly drifted into sleep, and she realized that she wasn't just caring for a creature anymore. Something deeper had begun, something even she didn't fully understand yet. The following few days at the outpost felt completely different from her usual routine. Before the hatchling arrived in her life, her days had often blended into each other. Wake up, check equipment, walk the survey path, take notes, return, file reports, sleep. But now, every morning felt like a new start. Every evening felt warmer. And every night, she found the little creature curled near her bed, breathing softly like it trusted nothing else in the world. But while she grew more comfortable with the hatchling, the outpost around her grew more restless. It started with quiet whispers in the hallways. People who used to greet her casually now paused and stared, as if waiting for something dramatic to happen. When she walked into the cafeteria, conversation stopped for a moment, and all eyes followed her until she sat down. Everyone knew. Word had spread quickly, faster than she expected. It seemed nobody could ignore the fact that she had brought home an alpha hatchling, something no one in recorded history had ever done. At first, she tried brushing it off. After all, she hadn't done anything wrong. The creature had been hurt, and she helped it. That was all. But the stares and whispers soon turned into comments she couldn't avoid. Are you sure it won't attack you? You're too brave. Or too trusting. You don't know what those things become when they grow. Some people weren't harsh, just curious. Others were worried. A few were quietly irritated, as if she had brought a problem onto the outpost. She pretended not to notice, but deep down, she felt the pressure building. The hatchling had no idea what was happening. To it, the world was simple. It followed her anywhere it could. If she stood near the table too long, it would climb onto her shoe and sit there. If she worked on her notes, it would curl beside her chair. If she walked to the door, it waddled behind her like it didn't want to lose sight of her for even a second. And the more it followed her, the more people noticed. One afternoon, she stepped into the common area to refill her water bottle. The hatchling stayed behind a few steps, looking around with wide, curious eyes. Two visitors from another outpost, tall, gentle aliens with translucent skin and soft voices, whispered something to each other. One of them frowned deeply. That is an alpha? One asked in disbelief. Impossible. They do not behave like that. The other tilted their head. Maybe it is sick. She shook her head. It's healthy. Just calm. Both of them stared at the hatchling again, this time stepping back a little. It should be showing dominance, or aggression, or fear, something, not quietness. She didn't know what to say. Their expressions didn't feel cruel, just confused. But their confusion only reminded her how unusual this situation was. A few minutes later, her direct supervisor called her into the observation room. She took the hatchling with her. She didn't want to leave it alone again. The supervisor stared at the small creature perched lightly on her arm. It follows you everywhere, they said, sounding half fascinated and half uneasy. It feels safe with me, she replied simply. That's the problem, the supervisor murmured. We have no data on this kind of behavior. None. If anything happens, if its instincts suddenly change, we won't be prepared. It hasn't shown a single sign of aggression, she said, firmly. Yet, the supervisor added gently. The words slipped under. Her skin like ice. She looked down at the hatchling. It was watching her supervisor with bright eyes, not hostile or fearful, just curious. It even made a soft humming sound, something she now recognized as comfort. The supervisor sighed. Look, I'm not telling you to abandon it. But the council will start asking questions soon. People are talking. They want to know if you've done something risky. We need a report from you, something detailed. And we need to decide whether this creature should be moved to a controlled environment. Her heart tightened. She knew this conversation was coming, yet she still wasn't ready for it. "If you put it in a containment unit," she said quietly, "it will panic. It doesn't trust anyone but me." "That's exactly why this situation is so unpredictable," the supervisor replied. They talked for several minutes, going in circles. Nothing was decided yet, but she left the room feeling heavier than before. As soon as she stepped back into the hallway, the hatchling crushed its face into her chest, humming softly. As if sensing her mood, as if trying to comfort her, she held it close. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm not letting anything happen to you." Back in her dome, she placed the hatchling on the soft rug where it liked to nap. It stretched its tiny limbs, yawned like a sleepy child, and curled up. She sat at her desk and opened her notes. If she was going to write a report, it had to be honest. She started from the day she found it, its wound, its fear, its first quiet night. Then she recorded everything she had observed since then. Its calmness, its attachment, its unusual reactions. She wrote slowly, carefully, making sure every word was clear. While writing, she heard little footsteps. The hatchling had gotten up and walked over to her, looking up as if asking to be picked up. She lifted it gently onto her lap, and it rested there, its scales warm against her hand. Hours passed. Evening settled in, the dome filled with dim yellow light. She returned the hatchling to its little cushion and stepped out to get some fresh air. Outside, the air carried a soft chill. The moons had risen early. A few colleagues walked by, nodding quietly. They didn't say much anymore. Maybe they were tired of discussing it. Maybe they were waiting to see what would happen next. She sat on a small bench near the walkway. From her spot, she could see her dome clearly, warmly lit inside. She could almost hear the hatchling's faint chirps through the walls. After a few minutes, she heard footsteps. One of the alien researchers approached, someone she had spoken to only a few times. They sat a respectful distance away and gently folded their hands. "I heard you have an alpha hatchling," they said softly. She nodded. "And that it sleeps beside you at night." She nodded again. The researcher's eyes widened, then softened. "That is strange, but also beautiful. I have never heard of such a thing." She looked down at her hands. "Everyone thinks it's dangerous. They fear what they do not understand," the researcher replied quietly. "I do not fear it, but I am curious. Why does it stay so close to you?" She thought for a moment. "Maybe it feels safe. Maybe it sees me as something familiar. Or maybe," the alien said, "you are the first being who ever helped it. Some bonds begin in moments like that." The words settled into her heart like a warm flame. The two sat together for a few more minutes before the researcher stood and walked away with a gentle nod. She stayed a little longer, watching the lights of the outpost shimmer under the twin moons. When she returned to her dome, she opened the door quietly. The hatchling lifted its head the moment she stepped inside. Its eyes glowed softly, and it chirped with a sound that almost felt like a greeting. She smiled, feeling her worries loosen just a little. She sat on the floor and invited it onto her lap. It didn't hesitate for a second. It climbed up carefully and curled into a perfect little ball. Humming again. As she stroked its back, she realized how much had changed in such a short time. The outpost might be confused or worried. People might be uncertain. Rumors might spread. Questions might pile up. But inside her small dome, none of that mattered. Here, there was only a scared little creature that had found comfort in her presence. And here, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: purpose, warmth, and a strange sense of belonging. The hatchling shifted a little, pressing itself closer. Its tiny breath warmed her arm. She closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. Whatever came next, questions, doubts, decisions, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let fear or rumors break the quiet bond forming between them. Not tonight. Not ever. The next morning started with a soft sunlight entering the small room, touching the quiet corners and making everything feel a little warmer than the day before. The house was still silent, except for the sound of birds outside. It was one of those mornings where nothing looked special, yet something inside felt different. I woke up slowly, still tired from the long day before, but my mind was more settled. Last night's talk had helped more than I expected. It didn't fix my problems, but it gave my heart some space to breathe. I sat up and stretched my arms, feeling the stiffness in my shoulders. I couldn't help but wonder what the day would bring. Sometimes days pass quietly, and sometimes a small moment changes everything. I didn't know which kind of day this would be, but I hoped it would be calmer after washing up. I went to the kitchen. The smell of tea already filled the air. It was warm, familiar, and for a moment it made me forget all the stress. I took a cup and sat near the window. The street outside looked normal: kids walking to school, shop owners opening their shutters, a man sweeping the sidewalk. Life kept moving like it always did, even when my own life felt stuck. But while I sat there, sipping my tea slowly, I felt something change inside. It wasn't loud or sudden. It was like a small reminder that no matter how heavy things felt, morning still came, birds still sang, and the world still moved forward. Maybe I could too. I decided not to sit at home all day like I usually did. Staying inside only made my thoughts louder. I needed air. I needed movement. I needed to see something other than these same walls. I grabbed my phone, put on my shoes, and stepped outside. The sunlight felt better than I expected. Even the slight breeze made me feel lighter. I walked slowly, without any clear plan. I just wanted to go wherever my feet took me. The road felt familiar, but my mind kept drifting. I kept thinking about everything: problems, fears, hopes, and those quiet dreams I never said out loud. Life has a strange way of making you feel small and heavy at the same time. After about 10 minutes, I reached a small park near my old school. It wasn't fancy. Just a few benches, some trees, and a narrow walking path. But it always had a peaceful vibe. I chose an empty bench and sat down. A few kids were playing on the other side of the park, laughing in that carefree way only kids can. Their laughter made me smile without thinking. While sitting there, I noticed an older man feeding birds near a tree. He moved slowly, taking tiny steps, but there was something calm about him. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't worried about people looking at him. He was simply enjoying his moment. I watched him for a while, wondering how people like him stay so calm when life gets tough. Maybe with age, people learn to let go. Or maybe he had his own battles and chose peace instead of stress. After a few minutes, he looked in my direction, and for some reason he smiled. Not a forced smile. A soft, kind one, like he was quietly telling me everything would be okay. I smiled back out of respect. I didn't know him, but sometimes strangers give you a kind of comfort even friends can't. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of the moment. It was a message. I felt a little nervous before opening it. Sometimes messages bring good news, and sometimes they bring more worries. But I opened it anyway. It was from someone who mattered to me. The message was simple but meaningful. Are you feeling any better today? I was thinking about you. Just reading that made my chest feel lighter. Sometimes all you need is a reminder that you're not alone. I replied with a short message, but in my heart, I felt grateful. It's strange how a few words can make such a difference. I stayed in the park for a while longer. I let my thoughts settle. I watched the birds, the kids, the old man, the leaves moving in the wind, everything. I wasn't running from my problems, but for the first time in a long time, my problems didn't feel like they were running after me. After some time, I stood up and began walking again, but this time with a clearer mind. I took slow steps toward the main road. I didn't feel lost today. I felt like I was slowly finding pieces of myself again. When I reached the main street, I stopped at a small shop to buy water. The shopkeeper greeted me with a cheerful "Good morning." He didn't know what I was dealing with, but sometimes even small kindness from strangers feels like medicine. I paid and continued walking. Then something unexpected happened. I heard someone call my name from behind. I turned around, surprised. It was someone I hadn't seen in a long time, someone from my school days. We were never very close, but we used to talk sometimes. Seeing them after years felt strange, but also nice. We talked for a bit. They asked about life, work, and everything in between. I smiled and answered politely. They shared a few stories about their own struggles. It surprised me. On social media, people look happy, successful, and perfect. But in real life, everyone is fighting something. Listening to their story made me realize that I wasn't the only one trying to get my life together. Before leaving, they said something that stayed with me. Life doesn't get easier, but we get stronger. You're stronger than you think. Those words hit differently. Sometimes you need to hear something at the right moment, from the right person, even if they're not someone close. The day kept moving forward. I walked to a quiet street and sat near a small tea stall. I ordered another cup of tea. While waiting, I watched people passing by. Some looked tired, some looked stressed, some looked happy, some looked lost. But they were all moving. They all had their own stories, their own problems, their own dreams. Life didn't stop for anyone, yet somehow it gave everyone a chance to keep going. When my tea came, I took a slow sip. The warm taste settled in my chest, calming me again. I felt more grounded now. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't suddenly okay, but I wasn't drowning either. I was floating, and sometimes that's enough for a start. On my way back home, I thought about everything that had happened today. Nothing dramatic happened. No miracle. No sudden solution. But the small moments mattered. The sunlight, the old man, the message, the unexpected meeting, the tea, all of it added up. Sometimes healing doesn't look like a big change. Sometimes it looks like tiny steps that no one else sees. When I reached home, I placed my phone on the table and sat on the bed. The quiet of the room didn't scare me today. I felt calmer, more in control. I realized something important. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days hurt more, some days feel normal, and some days bring tiny bits of hope. And today was a day of hope. Before sleeping that night, I wrote down a few things I was grateful for. It wasn't something I usually did, but I felt like trying. I wrote about sunlight, kindness from strangers, old memories, warm tea, and simple moments that made me smile. It wasn't a long list, but it was real. As I lay down, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I didn't feel perfect. I didn't feel completely healed, but I felt lighter than yesterday, and that was enough. The world outside kept moving, and now, slowly, I was learning to move with it again. The next day started in an unusual way. I woke up before my alarm, something that almost never happened. It felt like my mind didn't want to stay asleep anymore. It was as if it wanted to talk to me, to remind me of everything I had felt yesterday, and everything I still needed to understand about myself. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to decide if this strange feeling was good or bad. The room was cold, and I could hear the faint sound of a motorcycle passing on the road outside. For a minute, I just listened to the world waking up. Slowly, I got out of bed and walked to the window. The sky looked soft, almost pale, like it wasn't sure if it wanted to be blue or stay gray. The air smelled fresh, and the street was calm. A few people were walking slowly, some to work, some just starting their morning like me. I didn't know why, but I felt a pull inside me, a feeling that today meant something. Not something dramatic, but something small and important. Maybe today was another step forward, another chance to understand what my heart had been trying to say for weeks. I made tea, the same way I always did, but today the smell felt stronger somehow. I held the warm cup in my hands and stood near the window, letting the steam touch my face. I wasn't thinking about the past, and I wasn't worrying about the future. I was just there, in that moment, breathing slowly. It felt peaceful. After finishing my tea, I decided to go outside again. Yesterday had helped me more than I expected, and I didn't want to fall back into old habits. Staying locked inside my thoughts only made everything feel heavier. Fresh air felt like medicine. I changed quickly, grabbed my phone, and stepped out. The street was busier than before. People were rushing, cars honking, shops opening, kids running with bags bouncing behind them. Even though the world was noisy, I felt quiet inside. I didn't head toward the park this time. Instead, I walked toward a nearby market. I didn't need anything from there, but I wanted to be around people, to see life happening. Sometimes watching others live helps you feel alive too. The market was full of colors and sounds. Vendors arranging their fruits, shopkeepers setting up racks, customers bargaining. Even the small things felt interesting today. I walked slowly, taking everything in. While walking, my phone buzzed again. I felt a small jump in my chest, not fear, but a gentle anxiety. I looked at the screen and saw a message from the same person who had checked on me the day before. Again, the message was simple. Did you sleep well? I hope today starts gently for you. I didn't reply immediately. I just stared at the message for a few seconds. It felt good to know someone cared enough to check on me again. I typed a small answer, something honest but not too heavy, and kept walking. After a few minutes, I reached a juice stall. Fresh fruit was stacked on the side, and the smell of oranges filled the air. I ordered a small glass of juice, not because I was thirsty, but because I wanted something refreshing. While waiting, I stood at the side and watched people walk by. A young boy was carrying a bag almost bigger than him, struggling to keep it from dragging on the ground. An older woman was carefully choosing vegetables, touching each one with thoughtful eyes. A man was laughing loudly on the phone, totally unaware of how his voice echoed in the market. All of it made me smile quietly. Everyone had their own story, their own worries, their own reasons to be here. After finishing the juice, I walked toward a quieter street. The noise of the market faded behind me, replaced by soft voices and occasional footsteps. I liked this part of town. It was peaceful and had an old, comforting feeling. I sat on a low boundary wall near a closed shop and rested for a minute. I looked around and let my thoughts settle. That's when something unexpected came back to my mind, something I had pushed away for months. A dream I once had, but slowly forgot. Years ago, I wanted to start something of my own. Not something big, not something impressive. Just something meaningful. Maybe a small online project. Maybe a skill I wanted to learn. Maybe a passion I wanted to follow. I had ideas once. I had excitement once. But life happened. Responsibilities piled up. Confidence broke. And the dream quietly faded. But now, sitting there, I felt a tiny spark again. A small reminder that not everything inside me was lost. Some things were just buried under stress and fear. I didn't make any sudden decisions. I didn't stand up dramatically or tell myself I was going to change my entire life tomorrow. No, nothing like that. I just acknowledged one simple thing. I still had something inside me. A little bit of hope. A little bit of want. A little bit of me. After letting that thought settle, I slowly started walking again. I felt calmer, lighter, more aware of what my mind was trying to tell me. I wasn't healed, but I was growing. On my walk back home, I passed by a small shop that sold notebooks and pens. I stopped outside and stared at the window display for a moment. Something inside whispered, "Buy one." Not a fancy one, not an expensive one, just a simple notebook. A place where I could write my thoughts, my hopes, my small goals, anything that needed space. I went inside and chose a soft brown notebook. It wasn't perfect, but it felt right. When I touched the cover, I felt a strange connection, not to the notebook itself, but to the idea of starting again. The shopkeeper wrapped it and handed it to me with a smile. I paid and left the shop, holding the notebook gently as if it carried something delicate inside. The walk home felt shorter. The air felt lighter. The world felt kinder. Once I reached home, I placed the notebook on my bed and sat beside it. For a while, I just looked at it, unsure if I was ready to write anything. But then I opened it slowly. The blank page stared back at me, clean and open. It didn't judge me. It didn't expect perfect words. It just waited. I picked up a pen and wrote the date on the top corner. Then slowly, without planning, without forcing, I started writing my thoughts. I wrote honestly. I wrote openly. I wrote about everything I had been holding inside. I didn't care if the words made sense. I didn't care if they looked messy. I wasn't writing for anyone else. I was writing for myself. Halfway through writing, something strange happened. I felt a kind of peace I hadn't felt in months. My shoulders relaxed. My breathing slowed. My mind stopped racing. It was like my heart finally found a place to put its weight. When I finished writing, I closed the notebook gently. It didn't solve anything. It didn't erase my problems. But it gave me a small space to breathe, to release, to understand. Later in the evening, my phone buzzed again. It was the same person, asking if I was okay and if I had done anything for myself today. I looked at the notebook beside me and smiled. I replied, "Yes, something small, but something good." Their answer came quickly. "Small steps matter. I'm proud of you." I didn't realize how much I needed those words until I read them. That night, after the world outside had quieted down and the streets were empty, I sat on my bed with the lights off. The silence felt different today. Not heavy, not lonely, just quiet. I thought about the last few days, about how I went from feeling lost to taking small steps toward myself again. Nothing magical had happened. No big miracles. Just small moments, small changes, small decisions that slowly added up. I lay down and pulled the blanket over me. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep with a gentle feeling in my chest. Not fear, not stress, but something calm. Something soft. Something like hope.